Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 222. 222, October 15th, 2017, Sunday. Welcome to the Sunday edition of TowerGate. Well, the Vegas story is still the top story we're following because it's just continues to grow and expand. And the reason for that is because there is a great lack of information coming out from the investigating agencies, that being the Las Vegas Sheriff's Department and the FBI. Okay, so I watched the press conference on Friday, and it really didn't surprise me. The sheriff came out and said, well, there's not going to be any questions in this press conference. I'm simply going to read for you from a narrative. And then the FBI agent, Krause, is going to come and talk to you, and he will also read for you a narrative. So now they're not taking any questions, and they're reading from a script. Now, watching the general demeanor of the sheriff, I mean, this guy looks to me like he's now he may be just deeply emotionally touched over, the deaths and the injuries and all that happened there in Las Vegas. That could be perfectly the legitimate feelings of this sheriff and Mr. Lombardo, Sheriff Lombardo. And he seems like a pretty good guy, but he seems like a guy who's also under a tremendous amount of stress. He looks like he's very stressed out, and there's something that's bothering him, is what it looks like to me. Something is bothering him, and I don't know what that is. We can only speculate. But the fact that he did the press conference, no questions. The FBI guy was there, Krause, no questions. He read from the narrative. The FBI guy, Krause, read from a narrative. He attempted to dispel a couple of things. First of all, that the people conducting the investigation were incompetent or whatever. He took that personally, didn't care for that very much, and made it very clear. He talked about the change in the timeline and why that happened. He basically went out there and played a little defense, then read a couple of narratives, and then the FBI guy, Krause, he came out and he read a statement word for word, just giving you the usual flap about, we're conducting this investigation, we have this many guys doing this, these guys doing this is what we're doing, blah, 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 blah. Basically a press conference about nothing. And again, none of the real details that journalists, reporters are wanting to hear. People like myself are wanting to hear. People like you are wanting to hear. Just simple things that we normally do get in a police investigation as it's going forward. Now, obviously, if there's some information that might cause a problem because it has some effect on some ongoing information, then they're probably not going to talk about it. But there's other information that should have been collected and verified at this point, 12 days in, 13 days in, that shouldn't have any impact on any further investigations. Very simple questions that the media is wanting to ask, that I'm wanting to ask, that we're all wanting to ask. Questions such as, have you completed the autopsy and what did you find? Have you completed the ballistics report and what have you found? What was the weapon that was used? What was the type of round that was used to cause this injury or that injury to this person or that person? My question, my number one question is, how many rounds were fired? How many rounds were fired? Very simple question. Should have a very clear-cut answer. There should be no, problem with this question whatsoever. These are the type of questions that we want to ask and get answers to, but these types of questions are not being dealt with, and therefore they're actually creating, the sheriff actually responded to the fact that conspiracy theories and things like that, and that's very rare. Generally, you won't hear him ever even address things like that. People questioning the capability of the people conducting the investigation, people questioning conspiracies and all this. They generally won't even address that. Very surprised that Sheriff Lombardo even addressed the issue of conspiracies and incompetency and all that. That was quite, interesting that he would do that, but he did. But I mean, my simple thing here is really there's evidence, circumstantial evidence, there's audio evidence, there's common sense that suggests that there may have been more people involved. I don't think that's terribly conspiratorial. It's just looking at the facts, listening to the audio, taking a look at the event, And it's just, I think it's a natural conclusion to reach, and a question a lot of people would ask. And they could dispel every bit of this. They could dispel every bit by answering one simple question. They're telling us that Mr. Paddock was the shooter, or the person they've identified as Mr. Paddock was the shooter, that he was the lone shooter, and that the shooting came from the shooter's nest, which was in one location, Mandalay Bay, 32nd floor, room 315. Well, if that is the case, then every single round that he fired, there should be a shell casing. By now, the evidence technician should have come in with the photographers who photographed the entire crime scene, and they take a lot of photographs, and then they inventory everything in that room that didn't belong to the room. Everything should have been inventoried and verified, including every single piece of brass. Every single shell casing should have been accounted for and photographed. So it's a very simple question. How many spent cartridges were found? That would tell us how many rounds were fired. For every round that was fired, there had to been a spent shell casing. Simple question. Why can we not get the answer to that simple question? How many shell casings were found? Simple question. What were the results of the autopsy? What caliber of weapon was used to cause the injuries and deaths? These are very, very simple questions that they should have the evidence to. The evidence technician should have compiled all the evidence, photographed it, listed each individual piece of evidence, and then signed off verifying. Remember, it's a legal document that the evidence technician has to sign off on, stating that this is in fact all the evidence that was found. This is the total amount of evidence that was found. Here's the individual pieces of evidence. Then they sign off on that. It's a sworn statement. A sworn statement by the evidence technician. Right now, 12 days into it, the evidence technician should have accounted every single piece of spent brass. Simple question. How many rounds were fired? We would know that by how many shell casings there were. That's the only question we're asking. It's the only question we're asking. Why is that conspiratorial? Why is that a difficult question to ask? What round was used? What type of round? Or rounds? What type of weapons? Did you verify that the injuries or deaths were caused by what weapons? You have the weapons. If you have the weapons and you have the rounds, then you can put the two together along with the autopsy, and you should be able to tell, yes, this weapon was used, this weapon was used. This caliber of round. Yes, we've checked the weapon, and this is the weapon that fired that round, that ended up in this person's shoulder, leg, back, head, whatever. This is all very standard, normal information that you get in a police investigation. Now, true, there was a lot of victims. There was a lot of rounds. There was a lot going on. But it's been 12 days. It's been 12 days. And the fact that you cannot get the answers to these simple type questions, the most basic questions that you're going to field in a press conference like this from the media, there's no excuse for it. And the lack of getting this information is what's creating a lot of people to question the investigation. The investigation itself is providing the fodder for all of these questions, for the conspiracy theories to erupt. I'll stop talking about the conspiracy of this event when I start getting the facts that should have resulted from the investigation. But for whatever reason, they have this press conference. He takes no questions. The FBI guy takes no questions. They read pre-written statements, giving us narratives, and all these other important pieces, details of information, of evidence. You know, they don't talk about it, and they won't take any questions about it. They won't give any information about it. Why? It looks like a cover-up. And why do you have to have a cover-up? You see, This is why I'm skeptical. This is why a lot of you are skeptical. They are creating the environment that's giving us the skepticism. Who the hell is Jason, or who the hell is Jesus Campos? The question I asked in yesterday's video. Who the hell is this guy? No, actually yesterday I asked, where the hell is this guy? You know, the last time we heard about where this guy was, and of course he spells his name J-E-S-U-S, like Jesus, and I'm starting to think this guy is Jesus. He apparently can appear and disappear. He apparently is like a ghost. He exists, but he doesn't exist. He works for the hotel, but he doesn't work for the hotel. He's a security guy, but he's not a legal security guy. Who the hell and where the hell is Jesus? What the hell is Jesus up to? I don't know. But we know the last place he was seen was that he was at some sort of a location, a conference center of some type, maybe a studio, I don't know. But I'm watching the press conference with the head of his union, who was there with him and a couple other people, and they're saying, yeah, we were back in a room. And the media is all in another room, dozens and dozens of reporters, waiting for him to come out and address these reporters in a little news conference, press conference. But they're back in another room, this union leader, his union leader, and or a man claiming to be his union leader, Mr. Campos, Jesus, and another guy or two. And they say that they walk out of the room, and then they're going to go talk to the media. I guess he's going to go take some questions or talk to the media, and then all of a sudden, boom, he's gone. Just like Casper or Jesus. He can walk on water. He can disappear into thin air. What is going on with Jesus? And where is Jesus? No one seems to know. Well, there's one person that has an idea. We'll get to that in a minute. Starting to wonder about Jesus. First, we were told he was the hero because his intrusion into the scene is what was supposedly what caused the shooter to quit firing. But now we know that that's not the case. So what did cause the shooter to quit firing? Was Stephen Paddock a CIA pilot, like our good friend David Ferrie from the Kennedy assassination? Stephen Paddock had two small planes. A lot of times those small planes are used for trafficking narcotics, weapons, and humans. Was Stephen Paddock a CIA pilot, like David Ferrie? That's an interesting question. I've already asked if he had any aliases. It appears now he may have had an alias or two or three or four. Generally, these types of operators use aliases. It's a good question, and I suggested that the sheriff and the FBI should be looking into that. And I don't know if they have. That's a question I would ask. Have you looked in to see, Mr. Sheriff, Mr. FBI agent, if Mr. Paddock had any aliases? Now, Scott Bensack of MFA Independent Media Network, who's been on the ground in Vegas 2 times in the past week. He's got contacts there. He is suggesting that someone is being held up at the Videra Hotel there in Vegas and has been there since October the 2nd. And he's being heavily guarded. And he says he has a good source for that information and that it is verified. And Scott Bensack, he's kind of like an Alex Jones, if you don't know who he is. He likes to think he has more credibility than Alex. Maybe he does. I don't know. But I kind of like Bensack. I watch his stuff from time to time, and he's mostly legitimate. Certainly I would consider anything he says. He has been on the ground there. He does have some connections in Vegas. He knows about the feds and that type of thing. He's had his own experience with the feds, in case you're not familiar with Mr. Bensack. But he's claiming there's someone up there in the Videra Hotel has been up there in the top floor since October 2nd. Some people are suggesting it may be Jesus Campos. But I don't know, because Mr. Campos, Jesus, we know a few days ago was at another location where he was supposed to give this press conference. And probably to do those interviews for those 5 major media networks, he probably had to go to a local affiliate to their studios to be able to be brought on live on TV and have a professional look to it. I don't think he was going to do it from his home or his parking lot or his expensive Corvette. No, I don't think that's what was going to happen. So is that who is being guarded at the Videra Hotel? Or maybe it's the gunmen or gunmen who are being heavily guarded at that hotel. We'll have to continue watching that. Ben Sack, I think, will give more information on it. I'll keep following that, and we'll find out if, in fact, there is someone there at the Videra Hotel under a lot of police protection, federal protection. And we'll just have to follow and see where that goes. In the meantime, people are still looking around for Jesus to find out where he may be and why he canceled on all those TV interviews. Because it appears that he is under a gag order, as is his family. His family, a girl came to the door when Laura Loomer went there, and she said, we were told that we're not supposed to talk about this. We were told that we were not supposed to talk about this. Who told her that they were not supposed to talk about this? You know, when you have these hero type people, they're generally all over the media, and the cops like it. And the FBI would like it. Takes the fire off of them. You have the hero character. They love the hero character in a plot like this. But this hero character, unlike the hero character, remember the guy in 9/11? The janitor? The Latin janitor that was supposedly underground, and he became a hero because he was helping people out of the rubble. And then he was invited to the Bush's ball there in Washington and introduced to the press corps, and he was the big man on campus for about 2 or 3 days until he started asking other questions and talking about other explosions, including explosions going on in the underground garage prior to the planes even hitting the buildings. Once that happened, he became persona non grata. And then he began going out. I don't know if he wrote a book, but he was traveling around the country giving speeches, telling people what really happened at 9/11. And the media wouldn't talk to him or come anywhere near him. They had been given a gag order. Do not talk to this man anymore. He's no longer the hero. He's no longer one of the good guys. He doesn't buy into the narrative. He's out there talking about conspiracy theories. And so, therefore, he does not exist. And no more media wanted to talk to him anymore after that. So what we have here is we have a hero character who's no longer, I guess, the hero because he actually didn't stop the shooting after all. But the man who was told, that we were told was the hero. And now all of a sudden they want this guy clammed up. They don't want him anywhere near doing a TV interview. Why not? Is it something he may say? Is it something he may say that may contradict the official statement? Is it because he is not of strong character? Is it because that they don't want the media looking into his background? Is it because he has some connections that would be embarrassing for them? The hero turns out to be connected to organized crime, maybe gun dealing, maybe drug dealing, maybe human trafficking, maybe he's connected to somebody intelligence, maybe he's worked for intelligence. Why would they not want this man out there telling his story? He's the hero. Jesus. He'd make a great hero. Here's the hero, Jesus Campos. But now he's under a gag order. He has essentially disappeared. And his family has been told not to talk about it. This is what drives conspiracy theories. This is what makes people like me and you suspicious. This is what makes people like you and I ask more questions. Why the cover-up? Why the silence? Why can't we get any information? Why is this guy being silenced? What the hell is going on? They're talking about the fact that they blew the door. Have you seen the photos of the door leading to the alleged Mr. Paddock's room? I have. I'm sure most of you have. I see no evidence that explosives were used to blow the door. And usually when they say blow the door, they're talking about an explosive charge. Now there's another way you can blow the door. You can fire weapons at the hinges and blow the hinges out of the door so that the door falls on the floor because it's no longer connected by hinges. You can blow the hinges off. That's how we were trained to do it. Shoot the hinges. Blow them right out of the wall. Right out of the inside of the door frame. Separate the hinges from the door frame and the door falls down. But that's not what you see in the photo. You see no evidence of any explosion whatsoever. The door is a double door. The full right-hand side of the door is intact. Only the upper top half of the left side door has been blown out, and that looks like it was blown out with a couple of shotgun blasts to the door. I see no evidence of explosives, and the door is still on its hinges. They're telling us that there were 200 rounds fired into the door. Well, they're also telling us that the weapon was converted to automatic by using this modification to the buttstock. But the modification to the buttstock will allow you to fire a semi-automatic weapon at about 4 rounds per second. About 4 rounds per second. A standard fully automatic weapon will fire at around 11 rounds per second. They're telling us now that it appears that he had 100 round clips. Don't know anybody that uses 100 round clips. Me and my brother-in-law tried some of those 50 rounders, 2 different manufacturers. They were junk. He threw them in the garbage can. We tried them for a couple hours and said, this stuff's junk. I know personally, the way we were trained to use automatic fire on an M16 when I was in the military, 3-second shot burst. 1001, 1002, 1003, let off. Count to 3 again. Start again, on and off. 3-second burst, 3-second break. 3-second burst, 3-second break. Why? Because, well, the weapon heats up, number 1, and it causes it to jam. Number 2, it jams. You try to hold the finger on an M16 all the way down on full automatic fire until you clean out the magazine. That sumbitch will jam almost every time. In fact, sometimes it jammed when we did it on just a short burst. They really weren't made or designed to do that. But there are fully automatic machine guns that are designed to hold down the trigger and fire a whole bunch of rounds without the weapon jamming. They're specifically designed to do that. The purpose of the M16 firing on fully auto is not to shoot at the enemy. The only purpose that we were trained that we should ever use the fully automatic mode was when we were providing cover fire. When you wanted your guys who were trying to advance on a position, needed to be able to run from one point of cover to another, and you wanted to lay down a field of fire to keep the enemy's head down so they couldn't shoot at your guys while they're moving from one position to the next to advance on the position that you're wanting to take out. Usually a machine gunner or some guy with some grenades or something like that. So half a dozen guys take turns laying down 3-second shot bursts. Ba 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 ba. Stops. The next guy. Ba 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 ba. And you go down the line. You just go back and forth, laying down cover fire until your guys get in their position. Then you go back to semi-auto and you start targeting the enemy again. This is the purpose of automatic fire. It's cover fire. Generally not used to shoot people, but if you're operating a fully automatic machine gun and you have a bunch of guys, enemy soldiers or enemy combatants, firing from you and you can't really see them to specifically fire at them, you can use a weapon designed for fully auto purposes like an M60 or something like that, and you can open fire with a much longer shot burst into that enemy position and hope that you hit a few people, but generally they're going to put their head down, they're going to hit the dirt, and most of the bullets are going to fly over their head. You're really just trying to keep their head down while you do things that you need to do on your side. So it's generally a cover fire thing. It's generally not used, to try to hit the enemy like that. I mean, it's just generally not the way the weapon's used. Now, you can certainly use it that way if you want to fire into a crowd of people, but these long shot bursts that we were hearing creates a problem in the mathematics. If, in fact, there's 200 shots in the door, and he was using a 100-round clip, and he's getting four rounds per second, that means that he should have cleaned out that magazine quick enough that he would have had to change, in order to fire 200 rounds, if he only had a 100-round clip, he would have had to change the clip. But this is not what they're describing. They're making it sound like he fired 200 rounds without ever changing his clip. This is why I believe, and again, and many other people believe, that we're talking about some sort of a fully auto weapon, not using a magazine, but rather using a belt-fed system. There are other systems out there, clearly, that you can get into if you want to get into the minutia of it all, but It's just that the mathematics, again, are not working out with the reality of what we know about weapons and magazines and things and such. They're just problems. There's problems, and we have to ask much deeper questions to get the answers. And that's why we need to know what kind of weapons and what modifications were made. The buttstock is not the answer to that question. 4 rounds per second is the best you're going to do, but that doesn't answer the question of all the other shot bursts, the number of rounds, and it doesn't answer the question of how he got 200 rounds into the door without having to reload if he was using 100-round mags, which hardly anybody uses because they suck. They jam. And they also make the weapon very inaccurate. Firing on fully autos, you're not real accurate when you're firing on fully auto. It's not a very accurate way to hit targets. Of course, he was firing into a wide field, and in that case, it could be. If you're firing into a huge crowd, you don't have to be that accurate. You're strafing the crowd at that point. If the weapons were modified, who modified them? Who modified them? Really? He had weapons modifications. Well, okay, the buttstock thing, I guess you could do that yourself, but if they're suggesting that these weapons had been, the bolt carrier group had been modified, now you're not talking about someone like the accountant. Now you're talking about a skilled machinist who knows how to modify the bolt carrier group. Someone who knows and someone who has access to the materials to either manufacture a bolt that will work and function as a fully automatic, or a modification which would require getting the right spring, because the spring tension is critical in the bolt. The way the bolt operates is it's revolving around that little clip with a little spring on it. It's got to go up and down, up and down, up and down. You have to have the right amount of tension. That little spring is critical. It's a tiny little spring, but it's critical in the functioning of a fully automatic weapon regarding the bolt carrier group. I know this. I've disassembled and assembled many semi-automatic weapons, including the M16, which is a fully automatic weapon. I know the difference between a bolt that will fire on fully auto and semi-auto, and I know exactly what type of modification you would have to do to create that environment. And I can assure you, Mr. Paddock didn't have the machining tools, nor probably did he have the knowledge of how to modify a bolt. If you get that type of guy, you're talking about a professional, and he is either working for the intelligence agencies, organized crime, or both. Exactly how many shots were fired? Again, how much brass expended shell casings were in the room? That will answer that question. If there was only one shooter firing from that nest. I have again been asked about that I watched the video with Mike Adams, the health ranger, and about his scientific explanation. Yes, I did. I certainly did watch the video, but I just want you to understand that the what he lays out is only one way of many different ways that you can calculate where a shot may have come from. Certainly, his technique is one that's above my pay grade because it's very scientific, but I understand it. I don't maybe understand how to sit down and do the mathematical equation, but I have the common sense to understand where he's coming from. But I do know this, that when I was spending many hours studying the Kennedy assassination, and I know that back in the late 80s or 86 or 87 when the Congress launched an investigation into this, they hired 3 different companies to go to Dealey Plaza and reenact that. You can watch the video of the 3 different companies going out to Dealey Plaza and using this high-tech equipment they have, and the police, the source of the shots they used were that motorcycle cop's dictaphone belt, which he had left on, which captured the sound of the shots. They used that to set up their equipment and to figure out where the shots came from and how many shots there were. And so there's several different ways of conducting acoustical research to find out the location of where shots may have come from in an event like this. And again, the Congress used these 3 firms when they were doing their investigation, and they got their full report. You can watch YouTube videos on it, you can Google it, and you can read all about it. There are several different ways that you can find out where shots came from if you can get a recording of the shots. And again, the method they used in the Kennedy assassination, they recreated the shots. They fired shots from all over Dealey Plaza, set up their equipment, got their readings, and then they narrowed it down to where they could pinpoint where the shots likely came from. One final thing that I would like to mention is actually two things before I go. I'm running out of time. They're telling us that he had this buttstock modification, which would give him a cyclic rate of approximately 4 rounds per second. Jesus Campos, we're told, was shot one time in the leg by a round that apparently went through the door. If 200 rounds went through the door and he only got hit by one, he is Jesus. He's the luckiest damn man on the planet. Only one round hit him? That's very interesting, because in a weapon that's firing 4 rounds per second, how did he manage to only get hit by 1 round? 4 rounds per second, which means in 1 second he's at one particular place. Rounds are being fired at 4 rounds per second. He gets hit once. But in 1 second, 4 rounds were flying. How did he only get hit once? Did his position change in a quarter of a second? Because that's what we'd be talking about. 25 thousandths of a second. 25 thousandths of a second he was at one position, and 25 thousandths of a second later he was gone. 4 rounds per second, he gets hit once in the leg. My mind does not want to grasp that fact. My mind wants to say if there's 4 rounds per second coming, he's standing in a particular place, he should have been hit 4, 5, 6 times. That's a hell of a lot of rounds coming at you. You only get hit by one of them. He is Jesus. He really is. Finally, on October the 3rd, one day after the shooting in Johnson City, Tennessee, a man was arrested with 2 fully automatic weapons, which they believe he himself converted professionally, with 900 rounds of ammo, explosives. His name is Scott Edmonston. He's not talking. He's not saying a single word. He had illegal modifications to his weapons. They had these serial numbers removed from them or had no serial numbers at all. They searched his home and found more weapons and more explosives. They were following a tip. He was originally pulled over for speeding. Many guns, many explosives in Johnson City, Tennessee, the day after the event. Well, first of all, I can tell you this guy was a professional. A professional. Absolutely a professional. Question is, did he know Stephen Paddock? Or was he connected to the same people? That's the question I have. Thank you for tuning in. Day 222, TowerGate, October 15, 2017. Thank you. Bye.